Everyone. Hope you're all enjoying your summer. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Andrew Villafranca, Director of Financial Planning and Wealth Advisor at Boggs & Company Wealth Management. For our second quarterly webinar of the year, the Boggs team and I wanted to cover an important topic, cybersecurity. Cybersecurity remains a key focus for both our clients and our team. Ensuring that sensitive data, networks, and devices are protected from unauthorized access is one of our priorities here at Boggs & Company, as well as our custodian, LPL Financial. We take this responsibility very seriously. Today's session will cover not only the fundamentals of cybersecurity, but also best practices and practical ways to reduce the risk of your information becoming compromised. Joining me today is an expert in the cybersecurity field, Whitney Coleman. Hi, Whitney.
Hello, Andrew.
Whitney is a cybersecurity senior consultant who's been with LPL for more than 6 years and has over 16 years of experience in information technology. While she currently lives in Northern Virginia, not too far from me, she's lived throughout the US and has worked for several organizations, including Deloitte, the Department of Homeland Security, and the DEA. Throughout her career, she served in consulting, support, and technical liaison roles. More recently, her focus has been on risk management and security awareness. A few fun facts about Whitney. She's a car and plant enthusiast, an avid reader, and the owner of a lovely German Shepherd named Zara, who keeps her very busy. Whitney will guide today's conversation, sharing cybersecurity fundamentals, insights from her personal experiences, key statistics and trends, and best practices that all of us can use. Before we begin, I'd like to mention that today's webinar is being recorded. For those who were unable to join us live, we'll be sharing the recording afterward. Please feel free to share with your friends, any family members, or colleagues who may find it valuable. So Whitney, thank you again for joining us. The Boggs team and I appreciate your time. The floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that warm welcome. I am super excited to be here and to have this conversation with you all today. We're going to try to keep this very light and informative. I do not want to scare anyone. I want to make sure that this is helpful and relatable and something that you can kind of take with you. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this, Andrew, to you guys, but I also have a one pager. And that one pager has like a little checklist, if you will, that ultimately matches the presentation and the different like sections that I'm going to go through today. So if you're like me and you like a checklist, and you're like me and you like a little bit of homework to go with what you're learning, just to help make sure that everything is sinking into your brain and you actually go into the world, I think that could be really helpful. So we'll make sure that you guys get that. I also just want to say here too that we will have some questions at the end that Andrew will be asking me. And I'm really excited to go over those questions, some of our most popular questions. But if you are watching this in the future or here right now and you have questions, definitely write them down and send them over to Andrew and the team or whoever your contact is at the office, and we'll make sure that we get a response to you. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen. And I will ask that you give me a thumbs up when you can see it. Okay. We should be good to go with the screen here. Oh, I saw a thumbs up. Thank you. Okay, let's dive in. So you heard a little bit about me. Yes, I've been with LPL for quite some time. One of my favorite things to do is to speak with the clientele and the investors behind the advisor offices that I've been working with for years. So I'm really excited to do this. And I also just want to make a caveat here. Some of this information you may have heard before, or you may personally know, right? But you may know somebody who doesn't. So I really want to impress on you that this is information I would really love for you to share with those that are close to you, who you care about, and who you are talking to often. And just if you could find ways to squeeze these conversations in, I think the good news is, because this is such a hot topic, which we will talk about, it should be fairly easy to bring these things up. But the 4 areas we're going to get into today: 1, protecting your information; 2, I will talk about the current cyber attacks and scams that we're seeing. We'll also get into how to best secure your accounts and devices. And then we'll end kind of talking about how to best protect your family, your home, and yourself. Now, this first section on protecting your information is important because, as I mentioned, cybersecurity really is a hot topic and it's a buzzword that you were just constantly hearing. I feel like I don't watch the news multiple times every day, but I do. Every time I do, I feel like I'm seeing more and more information about different cyber attacks or different scams that are just rampant or a company that was breached or something like that, right? Every single time I go. And what's great about hearing about these things is that clearly it's being talked about, and sometimes I have found that sometimes the folks on the news will give you insight into what to do, what not to do, and why some certain things are happening. But I just want to be clear what cybersecurity is, right? And cybersecurity ultimately is the art of protecting a lot of different things, right? Networks, devices, computers and phones, data, all of that from being authorized by or by being accessed by somebody who's not authorized to do so, right? Or using it for criminal reasons. And also, cybersecurity is the practice of ensuring confidentiality and integrity and the availability of that information and data. So it is a buzzword, but it is a real part of being on the internet and living in 2026 with a cell phone and a Wi-Fi connection. And obviously, we need to care because it is something that is affecting us whether we like it or not. Kind of like AI, right? We have these conversations all the time. It's really hard to avoid these things. And so the one thing I like to remind people is that cybersecurity criminals, right? The cyber criminals that we see, these folks are really smart, right? It's not like when you were a kid. I know when I was a kid and I was learning about criminals and bad things that they were doing, it didn't seem very something that somebody super educated would do, right? It just seems like people just do bad things because of circumstances or they want to or whatever. But these cyber criminals are incredibly intelligent. They often work together, and they band together to sometimes target people or a particular person or a company or a country. And so we just have to pay attention because some of these smaller types of cyber crimes that we see can absolutely affect you and people that you love. So it's important for us to stay on top of this. The cyber criminals are only getting better. They're only getting smarter. AI is helping with that. But there's obviously different types of cyber criminals out there. And while we're not going to necessarily talk about warfare and terrorism in this particular conversation, there are levels to it. And I think the everyday crime that we see, whether it's extortion or people just trying to take money, it's rampant. And we are seeing an uptick in this across all aspects, right? Across our older community, across businesses, financial industry folks, kids, teenagers, folks on the internet, etc. So we want to pay attention. And the other thing too I like to talk about is there really is a timeline within your life of where these different cyber attacks could essentially be affecting you or somebody you know. So regardless of how old you are absolutely going to be seeing different types of targeted attacks. So with our young folks, we have, child identity theft, new account creation, synthetic identity theft. If you're like, what is that? Synthetic identity theft is where they use some real information and then some fake information as well. So maybe they'll use like a kid's name and mailing address or their social, but then they'll make up other information, right? And then two, right, we're seeing things with teenagers on social media, which is why we're seeing so many, ads these days for uh, protocols and settings and whatnot for kids on social media. But we also see with adults, right, getting into the workforce, we see employment fraud, we see wire and tax fraud, we see credit card fraud. There's all kinds of different types of fraud that we're seeing. And then too, a lot of this can affect, adults and also our older adults who may not be working. But we see elder abuse, we see family impersonation scams. These kind of from what I have seen, they target the older folks the hardest, but we see it across the board. Phishing scams, of course, across the board from adults up, um, tax refund fraud, as well as social security fraud. And there's also different types of healthcare fraud too. But a lot of things going on, no matter how old you are, no matter where you are in life. And we want to just pay attention to that and then to those around us that we care about, right? So even if you're in the adult section here and you haven't gotten to retirement yet, or maybe you haven't filed for Social Security or whatever, there are going to be people that that absolutely are being targeted because of where they are in life. And so the one thing I like to tell people, and I tell this to advisors all of the time, is I say to them, you all could have the best cyber setup on the planet. But if your clients and investors are doing nefarious things and they're not taking care of their accounts and their own cybersecurity, it does put you guys at risk. And so that's why I love when offices like this group here will set aside time to really educate you guys so that everybody can be more safe because it's all connected, right? You see here LPL Financials on the right. We have myself, right? Staff like myself. We have the Security Operations Center, different teams within LPL that's designed to help keep you all safe. We're using modern security tools. We're constantly updating and making sure we're using what's trending and what's strong and what's the best. And then, two, we've got cyber insurance, and we'll talk about that briefly. And then we've got in the middle your office, right? Your firm. Boggs is and they are required to do trainings on a regular basis. They have the relationship with you all that goes back and forth, and they also have the relationship with us at LPL. And they're also using financial tools that are secured, that have gone through certain, protocols and requirements and settings and whatnot. So that leaves you all, and you all have your investment accounts. You've got your actual assets, and then your personal information. All of this is important. And we all have to do our part in making sure we're keeping our data safe because it all intertwines. And I think that's something people tend to forget about, but it's really important. And the other thing, too, that's really important is LPL obviously has a website, lpl.com. But what I don't think everybody knows or is aware of is that we also have a cybersecurity page. And if you go into the lpl.com website and you search cybersecurity or certain, topics around cybersecurity, there are articles. And those articles, a lot of them are written and designed by my team, which is pretty cool. And so we have things on there about password security, device security, all types of scams. We try to post about the latest and greatest scams. And then we have videos as well, because I'm a video person. Sometimes it's not always, I like reading a lot, but sometimes when it comes to educating myself, I do appreciate a really good video. So if there's anything on there that you want to see that's not there, definitely let the Boggs team know and they can reach out to us. But that's something that we spend a lot of time on. So I just wanted to bring that up here in the event that you want to do a little bit more research and education after this call. And while you're doing that, if you go to go.lpl.com/cyber-fraud, you'll also find our cyber fraud guarantee, which I think is really interesting. And all it basically says, and you see there's a lot of text here, but the crux of it is that LPL will reimburse for 100% of realized losses in your impacted LPL accounts that are basically that incur because of unauthorized access to an LPL system, right? So if something bad happens to an LPL system and it impacts your LPL accounts and you lose money, that money will be reimbursed to you, all of it, right? That is our cyber fraud guarantee. And there's more about that online. But I think it's great to know that and to make sure that you're aware of that. Now, still means that you have to do your best to keep yourselves, safe, but that is something that LPL stands by, which I think is important. So with that, we're going to get into some cyber attacks and scams that I really do want to touch on. We're going to go through some. Some of them you may have seen before. Some of them you may have had either yourself experienced. I know I have had some of these happen to people that I know. But let's get into it. So this slide, it's always tough when I start this section out because sometimes I forget that I have this slide here. And this slide is really tough because I have been doing these presentations for years, and I every year talk about this report. And so this graphic here, this chart is taken from a report that the FBI releases every year. So it's like April, I think April or May every year that they drop this report. And it's conducted by this group called the Internet Crime Complaint Centers, IC3. And every year they put these statistics out and they have a whole section on folks over 60. And what they do is they compile the data to say, okay, how many victims, were that reported there being an issue, and then how much money was lost. And again, I've been reporting on this particular graphic every year. And when I saw it for this past year, this is from April, I believe, of 2026, when this was released, I was shocked. And it's really disheartening to see these numbers. And it's become like a personal mission of mine to try to make sure that we are doing better by this community of folks over 60, because obviously we all know, AI is on the rise, and we see, Bitcoin and other, financial things that are happening, and then voice impersonation scams are also on the rise. And it's really tough to see these numbers. And so while educational events like this are great, I do want to really encourage and push you guys to take the time to do work and to implement things in your personal lives to help better protect you and those around you so that we can eventually lower these numbers. Because as you see, 2020, obviously, that was a tough time. A lot of us were at home. We do see a spike in victims who have reported things happening, whether it's elder fraud or whatever. And then we kind of see this kind of dip, but then the money that's being lost has gradually increased. And then we see this massive increase between 2024 and 2025. And that's really, to me, what I want to focus on because, and this is just what people have reported, right? So imagine the amount of people who did not report and who thought, oh, well, it was only a few $100s, or, well, it was really embarrassing and I just forgot, or I didn't have the time. And, so for me, this is something that uh, we have to really pay attention to. And obviously, there's different types of scams. And when you look at the full report, which is available right now, you could go Google it. You'll see that there are different types of scams that they look at when they break down, what happened and what was reported. So anything, the romance scams are tough, I think, because with the rest of these, most of the time you realize at some point that this is a scam. I think with romance scams, they can be a little tougher because sometimes people don't believe that they're really being scammed, right? Because there's a deeper emotional manipulation that has gone on for quite some time. Whereas the tech support scams, inheritance scams, some of these other scams, you know eventually that this is not legitimate and that you have been duped in some way. So they're all heartbreaking, right? They're all bad and sad to see, but we have to be careful. So we're going to talk a little bit more about really these umbrellas, if you will. And when it comes to social engineering, we have to remember social engineering is designed to take advantage of our emotions. And so, like I mentioned with the romance scams, sometimes it's like this deep emotional connection. Sometimes they will use anger and guilt or fear tactics to make you do and to get you to do things. But we see this across the board. Phishing, I think a lot of times, right? Phishing, we all know phishing emails. We've probably received a trillion phishing emails in our lives at this point, and there's more to come. But the phishing emails are tried and true, and a lot of times they will use like "surprise, you won something from Home Depot" or things like that, or curiosity to try to get you to engage with an email. Um, Also fear, right? But that's phishing. With vishing, it could be a little bit different, right? Vishing is going to be over the phone, right? So those are phishing attacks, but they're over the phone. And there's that component where there's somebody there talking to you, trying to get you to either share sensitive information or do things. So we have to pay attention to vishing, and especially because we can't take back what we have said, right? That's a little bit different than some of these other scams. But then smishing is going to be via text. And so I know a lot of us received that e-toll text. We're going to talk about that here in a minute, but getting the text messages with either bad links or, threatening things, asking you to call a number, we're also seeing that. So there's actually a fourth one called quishing, which with a Q, and that's with QR codes. And so that's something that is, I guess, a little newer than some of these other ones. But with quishing, we just have to be mindful. Obviously, if you're at a restaurant and you're using the QR code, that's probably not a high risk. But if you're taking images, if you're taking pictures of, a QR image that's maybe on a car, I've seen them on like cyber trucks driving down the road or on lamp posts in New York City. We just want to be careful, right, when we're engaging with QR codes. So I want to get into some of my top, I call this the top down approach. So when you have a phishing email, I want you to do this. I want you to start at the top of the email and make sure that you are looking at each of these sections before you engage, right? Or before you do anything, and look for the red flags. So the first thing I like to do is talk about who is this from? Sometimes you actually can't see the full email until you click on it, especially if you're on your cell phone. So if you get an email and you're unsure, always, always, always make sure you can physically see the full email to see what's going on. I literally got an email today from, I guess they were trying to pretend to be Amazon, and they said, "Hey, your annual Amazon subscription is coming up due, blah blah blah." And but then I looked in the from, and there were like 20 people in that email. It was bizarre, right? That's a red flag. But when you see that, the actual email address is wonky, that is a red flag. Same with the urgency, right? You're like today with the Amazon, like your payment is due, and this one, we've paused your credit. I've seen all kinds, right? You've won. That's a simple one, but it's effective, right? It grabs people's attention. Usually If you are getting a legitimate email in your inbox, it will say your name. Why? Because you have signed up with that company to receive an email. Now, that does not mean that every email that says your name is legitimate. It just means that it's something to pay attention to. If they do not flat out say your name, that's a red flag, right? Anytime it's a generic greeting, and I don't think we talk about that enough, it's a red flag. You should not be getting emails that are generically addressed to you, right? Any links, and sometimes you see here, it's actually www and it's spelled out. Sometimes that's not what happens. Sometimes it's hyperlinked, meaning the word is there, but you hover over it and then it would allow you to click. That's another thing we have to pay attention to. But anything suspicious like a website or a hyperlink or even an attachment, if you're not expecting these emails, I definitely would not engage, right? That's a red flag. I would definitely not. And some of them are really well done and you want to click on them to see what they will do, but I really advise you not to. My favorite, spelling and grammatical errors. I feel like this is tied with my other favorite, which is really poorly um, like integrated logos, where like it'll be a Home Depot logo, but it's super pixelated and it looks funny. Um, it's a red flag. Spelling and grammatical errors. They can misspell things, right? Because people are going so quickly through their email, people often aren't paying attention, right? But when I'm scanning, I'm 100% looking for, the spelling errors and the grammatical things that just aren't adding up. And then the same with the vague or generic greeting. Same here with the sign off, right? If you're looking at the signature and it looks funny, maybe you see that's where you see the logo or they've embedded something bizarre. There are always so many red flags. We just have to slow down enough to pay attention. Now, I think I had received the one on the left here. Some of these are really good. Like they really do put in effort, right? They're not sloppy. I think for me on the left here with this Netflix one, the hello being underlined and maybe even hyperlinked, that's a red flag, right? When I see that. Um, and I definitely would not be clicking on these buttons. I definitely would not be clicking on these buttons. My suggestion is if you ever get anything like this, it could be Netflix, it could be Hulu, it could be Apple, it could be anybody, is to log in yourself on your own app or on your own phone, on your own computer, right? Log in yourself to see. Because if there really is an account issue with your Netflix and you go to your television and you turn it on, it will tell you, hey, there's something wrong. I remember when my debit card expired. And so, you have I've had Netflix for a long time. A lot of us have had Netflix for a long time. And so eventually your card will expire. And if you're not thinking about it, like I wasn't, then you will miss that. And then they try to pull the payment and then they can't, right? So what happens when you go, if you get anything, you'll probably get an email. But if you go to your Netflix and you check, it'll tell you right there, hey, we need you to update your payment. And so that's what I like to do. I go around it and I check myself whenever I get an email like this. Same with any other company or situation. Now, these text messages to the right here about UPS, I have received several of these. Usually they are USPS, but I get them. And I think these are really tricky during the holidays. Why? Because a lot of us are ordering stuff, right? We're ordering from places we often maybe don't. So if you're ordering things from Etsy and not to, but just that's a place that, you order from sometimes and you're ordering from a vendor or a creator and you just, they're going to send you something and maybe they send it and then like, there's questions. And so for me, this is a really good example because of course we want our packages to deliver on time, especially when it's holiday season. So some of these are really well done and we just have to pay attention. Now with phishing, it's a little bit different because it's over the phone. And sometimes we are seeing people impersonating people like, local PD. I've seen local PD call, and I say local PD with bunny ears because it wasn't really the local PD, but they are claiming to be the local police department, calling a random person and saying, hey, you missed jury duty. You now have to pay a fee. And they will have it to where they're so good that they have in the background, you can hear like the dispatch lady and people, like on television typing and having conversations. And it sounds realistic. I've seen people calling folks from the IRS and on the caller ID, it says IRS. If any of you are interested, there is a podcast called The Perfect Scam, and it is pretty fantastic. And it's actually hosted by AARP, and they will have all kinds of folks come on who have been victims of different cyber crimes, and they walk you through the entire situation, right, on what happened, and you get to hear from the side of the victim and and the host will walk you through it. And some of it's just fascinating what happens and what people are able to do and how far people are able to get away with things. So ultimately, the purpose of phishing is for them to either pull information from you or for them to get you to confirm things that they maybe have found, or they're trying to get you to send them money for whatever reason, right? Sometimes it's different things. It's not always the same reason. Either way, it's fraud, right? And once they get that information that they want, they can use it to do even more even worse things. So the first thing I like to recommend, definitely verify. And even if they try to help you, I've seen that where I think it was that IRS episode where the guy that called her sent her a link to sort of verify who he was. And it looked like a legitimate website. It is not hard for folks to duplicate websites that are legitimate. So you always want to do it on your own. And an example of that is I have a Bank of America corporate card. And they called me one day and they said, Whitney, hey, there's something going on. We need to talk to you about it. And I was like, you know what? I was not expecting this phone call. So if you don't mind, I'm actually going to call back myself. And the lady was super nice about it. She was like, oh, absolutely, not a problem. And she let me get off the phone and I moved on. That was a green flag, right? She did not pressure me or try to bully me into staying on the line. And that's what we want to see. Definitely send them to voicemail if you don't know who they are who the number is, even if it's local, right? If it's important, they'll leave a voicemail. They'll leave a voicemail, especially I think during election times. Oftentimes we're getting phone calls, right? You're getting cold calls from people all around, maybe your county or your state. And that obviously can be exhausting, but we don't know. We don't know what's going on. And again, these folks are incredibly intelligent. So we just don't know. So leverage voicemail. And if it's important, you can always call them back. Staying up to date on the latest phone scams and whatnot is important, as well as learning how companies will reach out to you. We all know that the IRS isn't usually going to randomly call, right? I'm not saying they never call folks, but to randomly do so is quite rare. So we want to pay attention to that. And then if you realize that you're on a scam call, hang up immediately. Hang up immediately and just completely disengage, right? Now, just to close out with this smishing, I feel like we have to pay attention to a few different things, right? What I think was brilliant about this particular scam with the Easy Pass is it affected people all across the country. And they were so intense with their messaging. And it was just really, really, really successful because of the way that they did it. And I know the one that I received was very aggressive in the threatening language. It was like, if you don't pay, then then you're going to lose your license and there's going to be points taken. Like it was absolutely like it stops you in your tracks. And of course, there's tons of people who see this and get spooked. And now we're seeing them bombarding the real Easy Pass websites. And so, it's bad, right? This was a really intense scam and it's still happening. So definitely paying attention to where the number is that it's coming from, paying attention to what they're saying and what they're threatening, and also looking at the website that they're allegedly telling you to go to. We do not want to interact with these. The best thing to do is to always report block, but just slowing down is going to be one of your biggest pros, right? One of the best things that you can do when you're navigating these things. And that's going to be across the board, right? Whether it's an invoice scams, and invoice scams are interesting because they have attachments usually, right? They're emailing you saying, hey, you owe money or whatever. And maybe you're doing home improvement stuff and you're working with contractors. And so you just have to be careful, but definitely not engaging with folks that you're not expecting emails from unknown sources. And clicking on things is definitely not something we want to be doing. Large companies, they just won't call, right? Or email you directly unless you have, booked a call with them, like with Apple. Apple's not going to reach out. You're getting automated emails at best, right? And again, if you ever have any questions, you always can verify, right? Verify, contact the company yourself. I thought that a couple years ago, I was doing a different presentation. I was creating like a webinar for advisors. And I really thought that gift card scams were like a thing of the past. And the more I did research on it, the more I found that that was not the case. Gift card scams are still quite prevalent because they're so easy to deal with. And when you have a scam that people want money, they want you to send the money, it's much easier for them to forward this to you and get them to get you to buy the gift card. So my two suggestions for gift card scams: do not buy a gift card that you are not okay with never seeing again, right? So it legitimately needs to be a gift. Like from the kindness of your heart, you're totally fine gifting this. And then two, making sure that in the back of your head, this is a gift card that you are willing to use in the event that the person can't receive it, right? And I say that because, give me one second. I say that because there was a lady who on that podcast had bought a gift card. I want to say it was either $500 or $5,000, and it was for the Google Play Store. But she was an Apple user. And when she realized it was a scam kind of midway through, she said, wait, no. And she ended the call and moved on. But now she was stuck with this gift card. And Google doesn't want it back, right? You can't really return a gift card. And that's what makes it tough. So I really, really, really recommend to only buy gift cards that truly are gifts, and to always make sure that your gift cards are places that you would maybe shop, right? Or you know somebody who in your life who would. So this next section, securing your accounts and devices, we're going to talk about passwords because this is really important. This is something that we can control. We can't really control all the scams out there, but we can control the passwords. So I want you to look at this and see where you think you might be on the color scale for, from maybe purple all the way out to green, looking at the number of characters on the left, all the way, to the complexity, meaning you have upper, lower, lowercase letters, and then numbers and symbols. Now, I'm sure most of us are looking at this and are like, well, wait a minute. I don't think most of my passwords are 14 characters, right? And so maybe you're in the brown section, maybe you're in the red. I think most people are in the red, right? If they're making it up on their own, most people are in the red. But if you see in the red, we're still looking at, 3 weeks. Now, this is a brute force attack. So this would mean that somebody is using specialized tools and algorithms to physically like brute force their way into your account. It's really interesting how they do it. I'm not super big into math and algorithms, but it is fascinating. And they do have these tools and they do get faster, right? But if you're in the red, the max is looking like 5 months, right? And so we want to make sure we have passwords that are unique, as in you're only using, and my tips are coming up, but we want to make sure we're using unique, actually, let me show that first. Unique passwords, right? We're not reusing the same I love my German Shepherd 44 over and over. We're not using personal information. Like, my dad is a Patriots fan, and I can guarantee you over his lifespan, he has definitely had some passwords that were related to the Patriots, whether it was Tom Brady or somebody else. I don't know, but we don't want to use personal information. It's just so easy for cyber criminals to find it out, right? We don't want to use dictionary words, right? Anything that could basically be easily construed, right? We don't want that. Or easily created. We don't want that. And then obviously using multi-factor is going to be a win to help better protect you. So how do you do that with, especially when they say that most people have about 100 accounts each? What's the best way to do this without having a photographic memory? And that's going to be with a password manager. And so having a password manager, especially one that you are paying for, not necessarily one through Google or Apple passwords, I think they're calling it now, having one that you pay for that has an app gives you so much. It gives you the ability to create strong passwords that are unique, to save them safely in an encrypted format, and it helps you with understanding where you're at from time to time. So I like to recommend that every few months, maybe twice a year, you take a look at your passwords and see how your health score is for that time frame, right? How are your passwords? Are any of them being flagged for being old? Are any of them being flagged for being, reused somewhere? Are any of them being flagged because that company maybe was a part of a breach, etc., right? And that's something that you can get usually from the paid versions. On top of the fact that if something ever happens to me, I feel better knowing that I have somebody as a backup to all of my passwords. And it's not going to be super difficult for them to find my information if something were to happen. And I think that peace of mind is fantastic. And that's something that you typically get with the paid versions. So really recommend password managers. I mean, I talk to advisors about this all of the time. It's just so important. As well as multi-factor, right? Multi-factor is also going to be that added layer of protection. And most of us know what this is, right? You get the text message, you get a code, maybe you use an authenticator app, etc. Right? That's part of what multi-factor authentication or 2FA or two-factor is. But we really want this set up for all of our accounts, right? From social media to personal email, you name it. Now, some of you may be seeing passkeys going around. Companies are asking you to set up a passkey. Really, the biggest difference is, a password is something that you know. And sometimes there's a security question there, and these are kind of guessable to a degree, right? Especially if you aren't answering questions like your mascot from high school or your mom's maiden name, etc. But a passkey is going to be something that you have or something that you are. So that's going to mean your actual computer, your phone, it's tied to the device, which is totally different than having a password. And so you don't have to worry about remembering a password because you're using the passkey, which ultimately could be biometrics, fingerprint, your face ID, a PIN. And it's just nice because it's harder to steal because obviously it's tied to that specific device. And it's not something that you can just give away, right? Because it's a password, you could just tell somebody what the password is or share it, right? You could just do that. But with a pass key, it's just quite different. So definitely recommend if you're seeing that, feel free to use it. If you're using a password manager, you can actually tie it into your password manager, which is also really nice, right? It's all in one nice place. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about social media even for a moment. I feel like if you have a social media account anywhere, you really want to make sure you have a very strong password for it and you have multi-factor turned on. If you do nothing else with all the information I give you today, please do that. Even if you only use social media on occasion to keep to keep track of your relatives, right? Or to get a hold of somebody that you care about that doesn't live where you live. We still want to protect these accounts, right? Obviously, we want to pay attention to what we post online. We've seen things on the news about this, people posting that they're on vacations. I know the summertime is here, you're going away, and then you post, hey, I'm headed to the Bahamas, and then, their homes were getting robbed. And so we want to pay attention to what we post and who can see it and who we're connected to. And obviously, we don't want to click on links and things of that nature, right? Because that's happened. I have had friends I'm connected to who I know are real, but then their accounts clearly were hacked and then they're sending me messages. My favorite was one that said, "Hey, is this you?" question mark. And then there was a link. I thought that was brilliant because of course so many people want to know, is it me? And the curiosity level there is so high that it's super easy to fall prey to. So we really have to be careful. Now, this last section on protecting your family and your home, I do want to start with your home, right? Because nowadays we can order things by just saying, hey, lady with the A name, and then we can order things. I know my parents have a smart home and they've got, electric auto, closing shades and, the ring cameras and all of it, right? There's so many smart devices in an average home nowadays. We really want to make sure we're updating our software, right? Whenever you see a notification, I know it can be annoying. Please update it. Sometimes not updating it can be incredibly dangerous. Same with your cell phone. Always update. Only connect devices that you're actually using regularly to your internet. So if you have things on your Wi Fi that are connected to your Wi Fi that you haven't used in months, it's a good idea to remove them. It doesn't take that long, right? Something we recommend. I also recommend reviewing the app permissions that you have. Sometimes we download apps and we have no clue what we're giving them access to because we just want to download it. We just want to get the app and move on or make the purchase or do the research, etc. But you have no idea. Even something as and I'll just make this up, but like Bank of America or Barnes and Noble is what I was thinking of. So Barnes and Noble, you download the Barnes and Noble app and you just download it. And there's this, of course, there's like the little privacy policy and you kind of click past that really quickly. But that app could be an app that is asking you for access to things like your contact list or your camera. I know social media is a big one for that. So just paying attention to what we're giving access to. And then use your router's built-in security features, right? Sometimes you can opt to auto update. That's convenient. Sometimes you can have it alert you when devices join. My brother-in-law does this. When I go into my sister's house, and I hang out with, I remember going once and having my work laptop and he complained because he said, Whitney, you just added like 4 devices to my Wi-Fi. What is going on? And he could tell because he had access, right, to his router's security settings. And I'm sure he got an alert. But I had my work computer, my personal computer, my laptop, or my cell phone. And then I think I had an iPad at the time for when I was traveling a lot with Deloitte. So What's also important is backing up your data. And a lot of us back in the day, we only had the option for a physical external hard drive, right? Something that you physically plug in. Some of us still use those. I still think it's a good idea, right, to have a physical storage tool or device that you can back everything up. You just have to remember to do it. But then we also have cloud storage, which a lot of us are using regularly, but just making sure that it's turned on and that you are making sure those updates are happening regularly in case anything ever happens, right? Sometimes ransomware attacks, they're targeting people who haven't updated their data, their backup in a long time, right? They haven't backed everything up. And so it becomes this whole thing, right? But if you're regularly backing up all your photos and your videos and your personal documents, it's much harder for somebody to try to hold them hostage, right? Especially if your cloud storage is encrypted and obviously has multi-factor, etc. Now, I do want to talk just briefly about avoiding voice impersonation scams, right? I think it is smart for us to think about having a family verification phrase, a passcode, if you will, or a passphrase that, if you're on the call with what you think is a relative, they would have to produce the password before you send any money. I still always recommend verification first, right? Figuring out a way to verify that whoever is calling is actually physically in the predicament that they say they are. I had somebody very recently tell me that he had received a phone call from his son saying that, his son was in Mexico about to go to jail for something. And he called the other son. And the other son was like, no, he's working at Trader Joe's right now. Like it's his shift. So he's at work. He's not in Mexico in trouble. So verifying, right? Figuring out a way to verify people for who they say they are. Obviously, you can reduce your public voice exposure, but that can be tough for people. I think the best way to do that is to just not entertain calls from strangers where they could be potentially taking your voice. And then just letting people know, letting people in your life know. I think this is one where our older community who maybe are in, retirement homes or retirement communities, nursing homes, et cetera, they may be entertaining phone calls, right? Where they're falling prey to these types of scams. So just making sure they know what's going on and what's at stake and then how to work around it. Now, something bad does happen. I want you to try your best to go through this, right? Obviously, staying calm, step one. It's tough, but I do like to have this in here because when you are, on a higher alert and you're panicked and freaked out, it does make it harder for you to take the right steps and to do the right thing. So, first, definitely be to slow down and calm down to the best of your ability. Do your best to secure that account immediately, whether that is updating your password, turning MFA on. I see this happen when people's social media accounts get hacked, they 100% panic. But the first thing that we want to do is update that password, turn MFA on, log out on other devices if you're logged in, and make sure you're good to go and you know what's going on. You want to contact that company, obviously, whoever it is, the bank, the social media company, whomever, and then make sure that they help in any way that they can. Now, if you are using the same password or if you have accounts that are connected, you want to check those too, right? Check those other accounts, make sure that you don't need to, update anything on those sides, et cetera, right? This is why it's important to have only one password per account. And then lastly, let somebody know what's going on. Somebody that you are close to, that you trust, please share that information so that they can be aware of what's going on, whether it's to keep them from it happening to them or just so that you're not going through this by yourself. It can be very stressful. And then lastly, reporting it, right? You can report it here, ic3.gov, right? Doesn't take long to do this. They walk you through it. You can file a complaint there. And then if your identity is stolen, you can go to the identitytheft.gov website. I really like this website. I feel like they do a great job of breaking down what's going on. They educate you, they help you figure out what to do. And I mean, I have to talk about identity theft now because this is important. A lot of us have heard of these tools, LifeLock, Experian. Maybe you haven't heard of Aura. That might be a newer one. It was a newer one for me as of a couple Decembers ago, I think. But these tools exist out here to help you with, alerting you if something's going on or if something has been identified in your credit or with your identity. Obviously, liability protection, dark web monitoring, your credit score, all of this information is being monitored, and it's nice to have that peace of mind. Is it necessary for everybody on the same level? No, it depends on your situation, but I do think it's worth doing. And at the very least, if you're not going to invest in identity theft protection, I do think that you can reduce your digital footprint. This is something that's in our control. And so privacy bees out there can help you opt out of things automatically. They make it easy. There's a fee to this, but some of these are free, right? Optoutprescreen.com, that's free, right? Reduces your mail-based fraud risk, which I really like. Some of us are getting a lot of stuff in the mail unnecessarily. Google results about you, super interesting, also free. A lot of us have Gmail accounts, but it's nice to be able to go in here and request the removal, right? Also reduces mail-based fraud risk. And then lastly, Delete Me. Delete Me they have a lot of ads. I've seen a lot of ads for Delete Me, but it's definitely worth checking out, right? It's ongoing and you pay it annually and it helps to protect you from that perspective. And then, the National Do Not Call Registry is also a great option for folks. So a lot of different things that you can take advantage of just to try to help keep you safe and like reduce your digital footprint from having access. And then also, right, this is something that's also free, is freezing your credit. You have to do it individually to these three bureaus, and you get like a pin that you can save in your password manager. But freezing your credit is great because you can control it. It's really nice. It's a peace of mind. You know that nobody can do anything that you wouldn't want them to do, and you can unfreeze it whenever and for certain circumstances. And obviously checking your credit regularly is important, right? To keep track of what's going on, right? If you're not looking, it's just like with the doctor, right? We have to be paying attention to these things, even though it may feel like everything is fine. We just don't know. Now, because it is the holiday time for taking holidays, taking a holiday, taking a vacation, going out, summer school, etc., I just like to bring this up because it's important. I want you all to stay vigilant when you're on the go. Make sure you have MFA for everything when you're traveling, and just even when you're not. Using a portable charger is really important. I know I travel with mine everywhere, not just because it's not always easy to travel and charge your phone, but also because we want to make sure that you're not plugging into unsafe places, if you will. Learning about local scams. I went to Spain and I found out that in Barcelona that pickpocketing is really prevalent, and I wanted to be aware of that. I didn't want my phone stolen or my money, and so that's something that I paid attention to. And then lastly, avoiding public Wi-Fi. So that's something that we can control for sure. Now, with being online, I just like to remind folks, right? Paying attention to what you're sharing, normalizing verification in conversations, and then making sure you are reducing your public digital exposure as much as possible. Okay. Now, here's your homework. Just a little bit of homework that I want you to take with you. Understand that LPL is committed, right, to supporting you guys across the board, advisors to clients, and protecting your info. Social engineering attacks will take advantage of your emotions, right? So that's always something to look at. Do not click on things, right? Or open attachments from unknown sources. Always value security over convenience when you're on the go. And protect your accounts so you can protect your family. So that is it. I'm going to show this slide for a few seconds here, but thank you guys so much for attending. I'm really pumped about these questions. So Andrew's going to have we're going to do a little Q&A.
Yeah, thanks, Whitney. Excellent presentation, enlightening. Thanks for also creating a huge homework list for me. So I have a lot of work to do on the cybersecurity front. From an advisor standpoint and also on behalf of the team, we place a strong emphasis on safeguarding our clients' information. You can tell from today's discussion that we're highlighting the reality that the work of managing and mitigating cyber risks never stops, especially as tech continues to evolve. So Whitney, we're on Q&A. I'm going to put you on the hot seat. We had some guests submit questions in advance. So the first question for you is, it's a two-parter. What's the best password manager, and how can I feel confident that if I store all of my passwords in one place, they will remain secure?
Yeah, this is a big question. Excuse me, I'm going to try to answer this as quickly as I can. But ultimately, password managers are encrypted in like a really intense way without getting too technical. And so when you have a password manager, you ultimately are having one password that you essentially know, and then the rest are saved and encrypted individually. So having a password manager just it makes it so much easier to have new accounts that you are adding, right, to your list of things, as well as making sure that when you're on the go, you can easily access them because writing them down is very tough. Your passwords are never going to be where you need them to be. As far as the best company, that's going to be subjective, right? That's like who's the best, financial firm, who's the best soccer team. Like it's very difficult. It's all subjective. What I will say is when you do your due diligence is to look for a company that will give you a dashboard, a security dashboard, and show you how you're doing and do the health scoring, the checking. I think it's called, there's a term for when you assign somebody as your backup, right? And make sure that's a feature, like I mentioned, is really, really nice. And then, two, you can get the family plan and have a vault where maybe you can share passwords securely with your relatives or people that you're sharing bills with or accounts with. So there's things there that you can do to help really get the most out of using a password manager, but they are invaluable. I tell people I'd rather give you my cell phone than and not use anything than have to remember my passwords manually. It's just too difficult and dangerous.
That all makes sense. You actually hit something on the head, and I have to mention this. Our clients, we have to make sure and suggest it when they become clients to add a trusted contact onto their accounts. Trusted contacts can be very important if we can't reach a client or if we notice some suspicious activity. Really helps too for elderly clients since we help retirees. But you hit it on the head that made me want to mention it. Second question, Whitney. Is it worth purchasing identity theft protection services such as LifeLock?
I think for a lot of people it is. I think peace of mind is something that people really want, especially in this day and age where you just never know what's going on. And so having that, it really helps, especially when you think about the coverage for if money is potentially ever lost, right? LPL has our cyber fraud guarantee, but that's only for LPL accounts, right? A lot of us have other accounts or other, places where we have money. And so we want to make sure that we're protected as much as we can be. And I think I think it's important. So definitely look at it. I think there are levels to it. And I mentioned that before. There's newer companies out here. I think one thing that Aura may have, I think when I did my comparison between Aura and like LifeLock, I don't think they offer as much protection financially, but they do offer other things. And so it just depends on your situation, your circumstance, and kind of what you're trying to protect. But I think it's worth taking a look at for sure, especially if you have been freezing your credit for a while and you want more, right?
Very good. Third question is, how does freezing and unfreezing your credit actually work across all three credit bureaus?
Yeah, so you have to do it individually. You have to unfreeze and freeze individually. So each of the three, and I believe you get a code. And with that code, you have to remember it if you want to go back and unfreeze it. So you don't want to lose that code. And that's why I mentioned earlier that you can save that code in your password manager. So in your password manager, you can save passwords, but you can also save other things. Like I have TSA pre global entry. And I have that redress number. And that number is absolutely silly, right? It's like a bunch of nines and zeros. I promise you that's the number. Like that's my redress number. It's crazy. There's no way I'm going to remember that every 6 months. And so I have that saved in my vault. And you can save other things there. But to go through it, you would just reach out to them and follow the steps that each of them have, produce that code, and you're good to go. But it's really helpful. I've heard that you can unfreeze, like if you know you're going to buy a car or a home, and so you can unfreeze for to allow it to let you do those things, but not other things, which I think is really cool.
Great. Last question, another two-parter. How can I protect myself from someone using AI-generated copies of my voice to gain access to my accounts? And what advice would you give vulnerable family members about being cautious when speaking with strangers or potential bad actors over the phone?
Okay, so let's do the second one first. So with people who are vulnerable, I would say the first thing too is what I've learned from these callers is that oftentimes they're talking in circles. And so if you feel like you are literally getting nowhere on a conversation, that's a really good sign that this is not a real call. I had a group recently who had a local bank that somebody had basically spoofed and they were calling the advisor office on behalf of this local bank, and we'll call it Andrew Better Bank, right? And they were calling and they said, yeah, we're calling from Andrew Better Bank and we're looking to do blah, blah, blah about a client that you all have. And what ended up happening is they were just going in circles over and over. And eventually the advisor group was like, what do you guys actually need? Like, what do you want? What information are you trying to get? And the person still couldn't say. And then so they called the Andrew Better Bank place, and turns out they know that this is a scam and that it's been happening for quite some time. This person, this entity is trying to pretend to be a bank that they are not. And so, or a credit union that they're not. And it was really wild, right? So one of the biggest things is reduce what you say, verify people who are they say who they are on your own. And then if you feel like you're talking in circles, end the call. And if you feel like they are getting agitated or angry, or something just doesn't feel right, or the connection doesn't sound right, right? Maybe there's pauses or you hear beeping in the background. If you really are paying attention, you can often notice things. Those are red flags, right? So just really pushing folks to pay attention to that, right? Less is more, trust few people, and just don't even answer the phone if you don't know exactly who it is. That's another thing that we can tell folks. I know it's hard. I want to know who's calling too. Maybe it's the dentist, maybe it's your doctor's office. Let them leave a message and call them back, right? So there's a list of things that you can do there, but those are my big ones. And then as far as trying to mitigate your voice being used by AI, especially, to log in, understand that if you have a setup where you can use your voice to basically say that you are who you say you are, understand that that is usually tied to a phone number, right? So it's like a second authentication method, but the first is your cell phone. So someone can't just call on a random phone number, right? I can't call Andrew's bank on his behalf and then try to use his voice from my phone to verify. That's not going to work, right? Because in the back of the system, they know that this is a possibility. So they're using it as another verification process, right? It's just the same when you call it into a place and they say, oh, Whitney, you're calling again. Because they know, right? They have a system that can tell that you're calling from this phone number or this device. So just know that, and also know that the less that you say, the better, right? We want to pay attention to what we're saying to strangers on the phone and what information they can get. And then just doing your best, right? There's nothing we can really do. If somebody wants to get your voice bad enough, they can do it, right? But if your accounts are set up to protect you, there's less damage that can be done. And oftentimes we don't do that until something bad has happened, right? We don't do that. We don't take the measures until something bad has happened. So doing this homework, doing this work now, I think will serve us better with AI and all of that in the future. So
Awesome. 4 for 4. Thank you again, Whitney. You were outstanding. And by the way, to our audience, if you have any follow-up questions from today's webinar, feel free to send them to your respective Boggs and Company advisor. So to tie it all off, as unpredictable as our world can be, taking steps to protect ourselves has never been more important. We live in a fast-paced digital environment where tech is constantly changing. The more proactive we are in reducing risk, the better position we'll be to protect ourselves and our families. So once again, a recording of today's webinar will be available soon, and we'll share it as soon as it's ready. Feel free to share it with your family members, friends, and colleagues. And finally, I'd like to extend a thank you to Whitney Coleman, LPL Financial, including our webinar and marketing teams for organizing today's event, and to our audience and all of you who joined. On behalf of the entire Boggs and Company Wealth Management team, thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Have a good day.
thank you.